The sky above the Deadmarkets of Sector 9 was the color of a bruise, purple, green, and sick with radiation fog. Chains hung from rusted iron beams, and from those chains swung things that used to be alive. The smell was copper and rot and something older, something that had no name in any language humans had kept. Cale moved through the crowd with his hood low and his hand near the blade at his hip. He was not here to buy. He told himself that every time he came to Sector 9. He was here for information, just information. The war had scattered survivors across 100 dead cities, and somewhere in this market was a contact who knew where the last human settlement still breathed. But then he heard her. Not a scream, not a cry. Something worse, a whisper. So quiet it should have been swallowed by the noise of the market, the barking of traders, the clang of chains. But it reached him like a needle through cloth. Please, someone, please. He stopped. Between two rotting wooden stalls, behind a cage of welded scrap iron and bent rebar, she sat. Her hair was pale gold, hanging in tangles around a face that was bruised but still sharp, green eyes that cut through the fog like signal flares. She wore torn black fabric, barely enough to call clothing. Around her waist hung a small metal tag. He squinted to read it. Claimed. Final offer. A ghoul merchant stood beside the cage, thick-armed, jaw hanging loose, eyes glazed with a gray film of partial decay. He held a rusted data slate and jabbed at it with one blackened finger. Last cycle price. The ghoul growled at passing buyers. After this, she goes to the processing block. Fresh. Still warm. Don't find that easy anymore. Cale's stomach turned to stone. The girl's eyes found him. Not randomly. Directly, like she had chosen him from the crowd with purpose. You, she breathed. You're human. Real human. I can tell by your eyes. He crouched slowly, pretending to examine something on the ground near the cage. Don't look at me, he muttered. You're drawing attention. Sold for meat human, she whispered, and her voice didn't shake. It was steady, which made it worse. Hold me. Use me. Just get me out of here. What's your name? He asked, still not looking at her directly. Lyra. Lyravus. I was a medic on Outpost 14 before they hit us. I've been in 3 markets in 30 days. He paused. I know where Outpost 17 is. The hidden one. The one they haven't found yet. He looked at her then. Fully. Her eyes didn't beg, they calculated. She was trading. Even here, even like this, she was thinking. How much? He called to the ghoul, keeping his voice flat and bored. The merchant shuffled over, studying Cale with rheumy eyes. You got creds or you wasting my time? I said how much? 800 processed creds or equivalent weight in copper-class metals. The ghoul grinned, showing gray gums. Or you walk away and she feeds the block before moonrise. Cale reached into the inner lining of his coat. He had 900. Everything he had carried for 3 months of scavenging, salvage, and 2 near-deaths. His contact money. His survival margin. He counted out 800 and held it flat on his palm. The ghoul snatched it faster than something that decayed should be able to move. Keys scraped in the lock. The cage door swung open with a sound like a dying animal. Lyra didn't collapse. She stood, slowly, carefully, with the controlled dignity of someone who had refused to let this place break her spine even if it had bruised everything else. She stepped out of the cage and stood beside Cale. Move natural, he said quietly. Don't run. Running means you're prey. I know, she said. I've been doing this longer than you think. They walked through the stalls of hanging things and stacked bones, past the fire pits where traders warmed themselves over burning plastic, past the outer chain gate where two ghoul guards watched them with hungry disinterest, out into the broken street beyond, where the radiation fog was thinner and the air tasted only slightly of ash. 3 blocks out, in the shadow of a collapsed overpass, Cale stopped. "Outpost 17, he said. "You said you knew where it was." Lyra leaned against the crumbled concrete and breathed. Long, slow, deliberate breaths, as if she was recounting herself, making sure all the parts were still attached. Then she looked at him. "North Ridge, past the Dead River. There's a subsurface entrance buried under what looks like a collapsed fuel depot. Blue marker on the 3rd support beam. You'll miss it if you don't know to look." He paused. "About 400 survivors. Medical bay. A working power cell." Another pause. "And a reason to still be alive." Cale stared at her. "Why are you telling me this? You don't know me. You spent your last 800 on a stranger in a cage." She almost smiled, just barely, just at the corners. "That tells me enough." He looked away, scanning the fog. Old habit. Always scanning. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I've been walking since Outpost 14 burned," she said. "I won't stop now." They moved north together, two shapes disappearing into the green-gray haze of a world that had forgotten most of its names. Behind them, the dead market churned on. Chains swinging, merchants barking, cages filling and emptying in cycles as old as the collapse itself. But 2 people had stepped out of that cycle. One had spent everything he had. One had survived everything she'd been given. Neither of them spoke again for a long time. There was no need. The road ahead was broken and long and lit only by whatever light the wounded sky still offered. But they walked it side by side, and that, in the world that remained, was a kind of miracle. Miles later, when the fuel depot emerged from the fog exactly where she said it would be, and the blue marker caught the pale light on the 3rd beam, Cale stopped and looked at her. She was already looking at him. "Welcome home," she said quietly. And for the first time in 3 months, he believed it might be true.